Let's cut right to it. You've met them, I've met them. Men who think they're clever, but every action screams otherwise. The truth is, stupidity isn't about intelligence. It's about behavior. It's about choices. And when you recognize these patterns, you stop wasting your time, your energy, and your life on the wrong people. Today, I'm breaking down the 6 clear signs of stupid men, so you never fall for them again. Lack of accountability is one of the clearest signs of stupidity because it shows a man is not only incapable of growth, but he is actively choosing to remain in the same destructive cycle. Accountability means being able to look at your actions, your words, and your decisions and admit when you are wrong. It means understanding that your behavior affects people around you, and that the consequences of what you do don't just disappear because you don't want to face them. When a man refuses to hold himself accountable, what he's really telling you is that he will never change because in his mind there is nothing to fix. That lack of self-awareness becomes a trap, and anyone who stays close to him ends up getting pulled into it. Think about the kind of man who always has an excuse. He shows up late and it's traffic. He loses his job and it's his boss's fault. He fails in a relationship, and suddenly it's because the other person was too demanding, too emotional, too hard to deal with. What's consistent in all of this is that he never looks at himself. He refuses to ask, what could I have done differently? Where did I go wrong? Instead, his first instinct is to shift the blame. That reaction doesn't just make him unreliable, it makes him dangerous to be around. Because you can never count on him to own up when things go wrong. You'll always be the one cleaning up the mess. A man who lacks accountability can never earn respect because respect is built on trust and trust is built on honesty. When you know someone will own their mistakes, you can believe in them, you can feel safe with them. But if every problem turns into a story about why it wasn't their fault, you're left with a person you can't trust with the simplest responsibility. The truth is, a man who cannot hold himself accountable will never respect your accountability either. He will expect you to take the blame, to carry the weight, and to forgive him endlessly, while he never changes. What makes this even worse is how lack of accountability often hides under the mask of confidence. He'll say things like, "That's just how I am," or "people are too sensitive," as if his refusal to take responsibility is some kind of strength. But what it really shows is weakness. Strength is in admitting when you've messed up, because that's how you learn. That's how you evolve. A man who runs from responsibility is showing you he's weak, even if he tries to act like he's in control. Over time, being around someone like this drains you. You find yourself questioning your own reality because every time something goes wrong, somehow it gets twisted to be about you. That's the toxic pattern of people who don't accept responsibility. They push the blame so far onto others that you start carrying guilt that doesn't even belong to you. And once you accept that role, you become stuck in their cycle of stupidity, constantly apologizing, fixing, and rescuing. The only way out is to recognize that accountability is not negotiable. Either a man has it or he doesn't. A man who owns his mistakes, who says, "I was wrong, I'll do better," shows you that he has the intelligence, the humility, and the strength to grow. A man who doesn't, no matter how charming or confident he may seem, will keep proving through his actions that he's not someone you can rely on. An inflated ego without substance is one of the most exhausting traits you can encounter in a man because it disguises weakness as strength and arrogance. As confidence, on the surface, he may come across as bold, self-assured, and full of certainty, but if you look closer, you start to see that there is nothing real behind the facade. His sense of self-worth doesn't come from genuine achievements, knowledge, or integrity. It comes from needing to constantly prove to others that he is important. This type of man talks loudly, boasts endlessly, and demands attention, but when it comes to actually showing results, there is nothing there. He is all image, no depth, and that makes him not only frustrating but also deeply insecure. Men with inflated egos love to talk about what they will do, but rarely follow through. They exaggerate their abilities, inflate their accomplishments, and overstate their value in every situation. If they get a small win, they will amplify it to make it look like a major victory. If they haven't achieved anything meaningful, they will use stories, excuses, or borrowed credibility to make themselves appear accomplished. The problem is that this kind of ego leaves no room for humility, and humility is what opens the door to learning and growth. Without humility, there is no progress because he already believes he knows everything. What makes this trait even more dangerous is how convincing it can appear at first. Many people mistake ego for confidence, but they are not the same thing. True confidence is quiet, steady, and proven by consistent action. Ego, on the other hand, is loud, defensive, and constantly seeking validation. A man who is truly capable does not need to broadcast his worth because his results speak for him. A man with an inflated ego has no results to show, so he compensates by bragging and exaggerating. Over time, this difference becomes painfully clear. Being around someone with an inflated ego can feel suffocating because the relationship is always about him. Conversations turn into performances where he is the star. He constantly needs admiration, attention, and praise, and if you don't give it, he becomes resentful or dismissive. His self-worth is so fragile that it depends on how others react to him, which means you are constantly put in the position of feeding his ego just to keep the peace. It's draining because no amount of validation will ever be enough. An inflated ego without substance also prevents accountability. Because he sees himself as smarter and better than everyone else, he won't admit mistakes, even when they are obvious. Instead of learning, he doubles down. Instead of improving, he deflects. This creates a cycle where he keeps repeating the same failures, but refuses to recognize the role he plays in them. That refusal to self-reflect keeps him stuck, and anyone connected to him gets stuck too. It's like being trapped with someone who insists they're driving the car perfectly while they're steering it straight into a wall. What's even more ironic is that men with inflated egos often crumble when they are truly tested. Because they have built their entire identity on the illusion of competence, any challenge that exposes their lack of substance threatens to shatter them. Instead of rising to the occasion, they avoid it, blame others, or collapse under pressure. The strength they project is paper, thin, and the moment life requires real resilience, they fail. That's why this kind of ego is not only a sign of stupidity but also of fragility. At the core, an inflated ego without substance is about fear, the fear of not being enough. Instead of confronting that fear and doing the hard work to grow, these men choose the easy route of pretending. They build a false image, hoping no one will notice what's missing, but people always notice eventually. Substance shows in action, in results, in how you treat people when you don't need anything from them. Ego, without anything to back it up, is just noise. And when the noise fades, there is nothing left to respect, admire, or follow. Poor decision making under pressure exposes the true nature of a man, because it reveals how he thinks when stakes are high and emotions are involved. Anyone can appear composed when life is smooth, but pressure situations strip away the mask and show you whether a man has discipline, clarity, and judgment, or whether he crumbles, panics, and makes reckless choices that cost him and everyone around him. Stupidity in this sense isn't about not knowing the right answer, it's about being unable to pause, assess, and act in a way that moves things forward rather than spiraling them out of control. A man who makes poor decisions under pressure often lets emotions lead instead of logic. He reacts impulsively because his ego or fear takes control. If he feels challenged, he lashes out. If he feels cornered, he makes a rash move without thinking through the consequences. If he feels overwhelmed, he takes the easiest route instead of the smartest one. This kind of behavior might look minor in small situations, like snapping at someone in an argument, but in bigger moments it can destroy relationships, careers, and even his own reputation. When the pressure rises, stupidity shows itself in how quickly he abandons reason. One of the signs of this is inconsistency. Under pressure, instead of staying calm and decisive, he changes his mind constantly. Second, guessing or flipping his choices because he cannot handle the weight of commitment. This inconsistency leaves people around him confused, frustrated, and eventually mistrustful. Nobody wants to rely on someone who collapses the moment things get hard. That lack of steadiness makes him unreliable, and unreliability is one of the clearest markers of a man you cannot build with. Another danger with poor decision making under pressure is that it often leads to shortcuts. Instead of taking the difficult but effective route, he grabs at whatever seems easiest in the moment. He avoids discomfort and hard choices, choosing temporary relief over long-term success. This is how stupid decisions multiply, because every short-term choice creates long-term problems. Whether it's financial decisions, relationship conflicts, or work responsibilities, a man who cannot endure discomfort will always sabotage himself by choosing the quick fix that makes him feel better in the moment but costs him more in the future. What makes this even more damaging is that poor decisions under pressure don't only affect him, they affect everyone tied to him. If you're close to a man like this, you end up living with the fallout of his impulsive choices. You're the one cleaning up after his mistakes, absorbing the stress, or paying the price for his recklessness. It doesn't take long before you realize you're not in a partnership but in damage control mode, constantly bracing yourself for the next mess he's about to create. A man who makes smart decisions under pressure is someone you can trust because he has trained himself to think clearly, regulate his emotions, and choose wisely even when things get chaotic. He doesn't let fear or ego drive him, and that makes him strong in ways that truly matter. By contrast, the man who falls apart in difficult moments shows you that he cannot lead himself, let alone anyone else. His lack of control exposes not only his weakness but his unwillingness to grow. At the heart of this, poor decision making under pressure comes from lack of preparation and lack of discipline. Life will always test you, but the men who rise under pressure are the ones who prepare when times are calm. The men who fail are the ones who coast until the storm hits and then scramble without a plan. Stupidity is revealed when someone doesn't take responsibility to strengthen themselves in advance, because when the test comes, and it always does, they fold. That is why you should never ignore how a man acts under pressure, because it will tell you more about him than his words or his appearance ever could. Disrespect toward others is one of the most telling signs of stupidity because it shows a man does not understand the value of people, relationships, or the basic principles that hold society together. Respect is the foundation of human interaction. It costs nothing, yet it determines how far someone can go in life and how much trust and loyalty they will receive in return. A man who disrespects others reveals his lack of wisdom and his inability to connect with people in any meaningful way. His behavior exposes not only immaturity but also deep insecurity, because truly strong men don't need to put others down to feel powerful. Disrespect comes in many forms, and sometimes it isn't obvious right away. It can look like dismissing other people's opinions, interrupting when someone else is speaking, or belittling the contributions of those around him. It can also show up in more blatant ways, mocking, insulting, or ignoring boundaries. No matter how it appears, the root is the same. He doesn't value people enough to treat them with dignity. This attitude is a red flag in every part of life, because someone who disrespects others will eventually disrespect you. One of the most common masks disrespect wears is selective respect. A man may show politeness or charm toward people he thinks can benefit him, while treating others with contempt if they have nothing to offer. For example, he might be kind to a boss or authority figure, but rude to a waiter, a cleaner, or someone he considers beneath him. That behavior reveals his true character. A man with integrity treats everyone with respect, regardless of status. A man without it reveals his stupidity by thinking he gains something by degrading others. In reality, people always notice this kind of behavior, and over time it destroys his reputation. Disrespect is also a sign of emotional weakness. Men who cannot control their frustration or insecurity often project it outward, lashing out at others to make themselves feel stronger. Instead of managing their emotions, they unload them on the people around them. This lack of control is foolish because it burns bridges, alienates allies, and creates enemies where none existed before. Intelligent men know that respect builds cooperation and goodwill, while disrespect creates resistance and conflict. Choosing the latter is always self-sabotage. In relationships, disrespect is one of the clearest indicators of future failure. A man who disrespects his partner, whether through dismissive comments, controlling behavior, or lack of consideration, shows that he does not value the bond. Disrespect erodes trust, intimacy, and connection. It turns love into resentment and partnership into competition. A man who consistently disrespects the people closest to him is not only failing them, he is showing he lacks the maturity to sustain a healthy relationship. Stupidity here is refusing to recognize that love cannot survive without mutual respect. What makes disrespect so damaging is how far its consequences reach. At work, it can stall a career because colleagues and leaders are unwilling to support someone who treats others poorly. In friendships, it leads to isolation because nobody wants to be around someone who constantly belittles or undermines. In family, it creates lasting wounds because the people who should feel safe end up feeling devalued. Everywhere it shows up, disrespect shrinks a man's world instead of expanding it. At the heart of it, disrespect toward others is ignorance disguised as strength. It comes from the misguided belief that tearing others down somehow lifts you up. The truth is the opposite. Respect multiplies opportunities while disrespect closes doors. Respect attracts loyalty, while disrespect breeds resentment. Respect builds lasting influence, while disrespect leaves a trail of broken connections. A man who chooses disrespect is showing you not only his lack of wisdom, but also his lack of vision, because he cannot see how every interaction builds or destroys his future. The way a man treats others, especially those who have nothing to give him, tells you everything about who he is. Disrespect is not a minor flaw or a bad habit. It is a warning sign of a deeper problem, a lack of character, and a lack of intelligence. Once you see it, don't ignore it because it never stays contained. A man who disrespects others today will eventually turn that same lack of regard toward you. Ignorance disguised as confidence is one of the most dangerous traits in a man because it combines the absence of knowledge with the arrogance of thinking he knows everything. Confidence by itself is not a problem. Real confidence is built on experience, discipline, and wisdom. But when ignorance hides behind it, what you see is a man who speaks loudly, acts boldly, and convinces others to follow him, even though he has no understanding of what he's talking about. This is stupidity at its highest form, because not only does he mislead himself, but he also misleads those who trust him. The ignorant but overconfident man loves to dominate conversations. He will interrupt, talk over people, and insist that his opinion is the only valid one, even when he has no facts to back it up. If someone challenges him instead of listening or learning, he becomes defensive and dismissive. He takes disagreement as a threat because deep down he knows he has nothing solid to stand on. This behavior doesn't just reveal his lack of knowledge, it reveals his inability to grow. A man who cannot admit what he doesn't know will never improve because he refuses to face his own limitations. In professional settings, this trait is especially destructive. An ignorant man who pretends to know everything makes reckless decisions, ignores expert advice, and pushes forward with bad ideas simply to protect his pride. He values looking smart over actually being smart, which leads to costly mistakes. Teams and organizations suffer when someone like this is in charge because he doesn't seek input, doesn't listen, and doesn't adjust. Instead of progress, he creates chaos. His misplaced confidence convinces others to trust him at first, but eventually his ignorance becomes impossible to ignore, and by then, the damage is already done. In personal relationships, ignorance disguised as confidence shows up in stubbornness. He won't admit when he's wrong. He won't consider another perspective. He won't acknowledge that his partner might have more insight on certain things. Instead, he positions himself as the authority, shutting down healthy communication. Over time, this dynamic suffocates the relationship because respect requires mutual listening and learning. A man who thinks he already knows everything has no room for partnership, only for control. That arrogance destroys connection and creates resentment. What makes this kind of ignorance so difficult to deal with is how convincing it can appear on the surface. Many people confuse volume with truth and certainty with knowledge. A man who speaks with conviction can seem intelligent, even if everything he says is empty. That's why so many people fall for this type. They mistake confidence for competence, but the truth always reveals itself over time. The man who actually knows what he's doing doesn't need to perform. His results, his actions, and his calm presence speak louder than words. The man who only has ignorance will eventually expose himself because when reality demands results, his false confidence crumbles. The core problem is that ignorance disguised as confidence blocks growth. To learn, you have to admit what you don't know. To improve, you have to acknowledge your flaws. But this type of man refuses to take that step because it would mean confronting his own inadequacy. So he doubles down, becoming louder, more stubborn, and more resistant to change. That resistance keeps him trapped in the same cycle of mistakes, never evolving, never progressing, always pretending. True intelligence isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing what you don't know and being willing to seek answers. True confidence isn't about dominating. It's about staying grounded and steady even when challenged. A man who confuses ignorance for confidence has neither. He is simply acting out a performance that fools some for a while but eventually fools no one. That's why this trait is not just irritating but destructive, because it ruins opportunities, damages relationships, and keeps him locked in a false version of himself. The danger of ignorance wrapped in confidence is that it demands your attention but offers you nothing of value in return. It's a distraction, a hollow display, and a trap for anyone who doesn't see through it quickly enough. Once you do see it, the smartest move is to step away, because nothing good can come from following someone who doesn't know where he's going but insists he does.